Welcome back to our channel. We're back with another episode of F1 series. In the episode today, we'll be talking about if cars were harmed in the short race. Mercedes feared missing the Austrian Grand Prix. Mike Elliott, the technical director for Mercedes Formula F1, acknowledges that the team worried one of its vehicles would not make the Austrian Grand Prix if it suffered damage in the short race on Saturday. But before we start with our episode, make sure you've already subscribed to our channel and press the bell icon to prevent missing our future updates. Lewis Hamilton was obliged to move the spare chassis, which was set up for him on Saturday morning after both he and George Russell suffered serious crashes in qualifying's Q3 session on Friday. The only spare example of the low-drag specification built for the Austrian GP was given to Hamilton because he was farther down the field and therefore had more overtaking to perform. Both drivers lost their rear wings in the collisions. For the sprint, Russell was forced to move to a less ideal rear wing with higher downforce. Additionally, the crew only had one extra floor and had to create a second one from what was left of the damaged floors. Mercedes had a rush to have two cars ready for racing on Saturday, which shows how the cost cap has affected the top team's capacity to create enough spares in the standard they're currently facing. Elliott remarked in the Mercedes' Austria debrief video, "When you crash two cars, it's always going to make it a very challenging weekend from there on." He said, "We broke both floors, both rear wings, and a significant amount of suspension because of the extensive damage we caused to the automobiles. We also harmed Lewis's car's front wing, and we cosmetically harmed the chassis. Damage that can be fixed, but not over the weekend. That required starting from scratch to rebuild Lewis's automobile and just attempting to construct one floor out of two. We could only accommodate one complete spare, so we had to make the most of the two damaged floors to build another." Both drivers had the opportunity to inspect their rebuilt vehicles and make use of the few modifications permitted after qualifying during the FP2 session. Elliott noted that the team was aware that additional substantial damage could pose a significant issue going into the Saturday afternoon sprint race. After rebuilding the cars, he added, "We also had to dial in the setup again, and you only have a very small window of time in FP2 to accomplish that. So that was always going to be another sacrifice. The drivers are now in a position where if they damage them in the sprint race, we may not be able to compete on Saturday after causing such severe damage to two vehicles on Friday. Thus, everything that needs to be taken into account undermines your weekend." The team had little time on Saturday morning to prepare the two cars because post-qualifying parc fermé regulations were in effect on Friday night after the regular qualifying format had taken place. Breaking parc fermé would have guaranteed a pit lane start for the sprint race. There was a ton of effort involved in getting those cars ready, and in Lewis's case, he had damaged the chassis so badly it was simply cosmetic damage, but it was the damage we couldn't restore on the spot. We had to essentially start his car over on Saturday morning. That car had to be built from scratch the Saturday morning, fitting the engine, the transmission, all the suspension, and all the automobile systems that bolt around the chassis all had to be placed in place. That's a remarkable accomplishment, and they deserve all the credit for really bringing us back out and into FP2. With an incredible lap today, Max Verstappen secured pole position for the Austrian Grand Prix. However, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, the Mercedes drivers, had a dismal performance and ended the day with their cars in the barriers, in sharp contrast to his command of the circuit. Mercedes will have a long weekend following their terrible day in Spielberg. Russell, soon after, crashed out in Q3, suffering a significant hit. Hamilton, unfortunately, despite making unusual mistakes, neither was injured. Russell placed 4th and Hamilton 9th. This was a disappointment for the team because they had hoped to build on their performance at the British GP. Inconsolable and unable to explain how he had misplaced the automobile, Hamilton was distraught. In the end, he admitted, "I'm extremely disappointed in myself. I'm really sorry to the team. I never like to harm it or bring it back damaged. Everyone worked so hard to put this automobile together. I believe we were vying for a top 3 spot, but I'm stumped. In turn 7, I simply lost the back end, and that was it." They have a chance to recover and gain ground as the sprint race format on Saturday will determine the starting lineup for the Grand Prix on Sunday, but a hard night awaits the Mercedes mechanics. Verstappen, who's in excellent form at the Grand Prix, held in his team's hometown, put in a strong final run to guarantee that he would start at the top of the grid for the sprint race. The Red Bull driver finished 2nd and 3rd ahead of Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc's Ferraris. The top 3 finishers in a very competitive session were separated by only 0.08 of a second. Sergio Perez, a Red Bull driver, had finished 4th, But after it was discovered that he had breached track limits during a hot lap in quarter 2, his quarter 3 times were removed and he dropped to 13th, moving other drivers up the field. With a time of 1 minute, 5.092 seconds on his first hot lap in quarter 3, Verstappen established the pace. Hamilton, though, had a surprise for him in the back. He lost the rear as he entered turn 7 and sought to recover it, but he was unable to do so. He sped up and collided with something, maybe damaging his gearbox and necessitating a replacement. When the hearing resumed, Russell quickly followed Hamilton into the barriers as some members of the fervently partisan Dutch contingent in the audience cheered his misfortune. At turn 10, he accelerated quickly, spun, and tumbled off backward. He too lamented the driver's mistake of accelerating too quickly. "I wouldn't argue that we managed to escape lucky. Making a mistake like this is not fortunate or lucky," he declared. "I might have finished 4th. I went for it because I had a 10th advantage on my lap. I'm sorry to the team and the garage. I could have been on for 3rd, but we had to assess the extent of the damage." Leclerc held the lead over the last runs of the red-flagged race, but Verstappen pulled off a strong final sector, especially the last 2 corners, to achieve a time of 1 minute, 4.984, 200ths faster than the Ferrari. For Haas, Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher finished 6th and 7th respectively. For Alpine, Esteban Ocon finished 5th, Fernando Alonso finished 8th, and Pierre Gasly finished 10th for AlphaTauri. Valtteri Bottas will begin the sprint race after being classified in 12th place. He will, however, start Sunday's Grand Prix from the rear of the guide due to the penalties that followed his decision to use a new power unit. AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda finished 14th. Williams' Alex Albon finished 11th, and McLaren's Lando Norris finished 15th. For McLaren, Daniel Ricciardo finished 16th, and Alfa Romeo, Guan Yu Zhou finished in 18th place. This was his first appearance in a competitive session after his severe crash at Silverstone last week. Williams' Nicholas Latifi placed 19th. For Aston Martin, Lance Stroll finished 20th, while Sebastian Vettel was 17th. As we conclude the video, let's say that, how was Lewis allowed to start 10th if he didn't utilize the same rear wing specification and the car was in the park after qualifying? He ought to have taken off from the pit lane. George Russell was given a 5-second time penalty for delaying Perez earlier in the race. Why did the team not receive a second penalty for working on the automobile before the 5-second penalty period was up? On the jacks, the automobile was raced first. After last year's disaster, it appears like every facet of Formula 1 is currently in doubt. They need to abandon the sprint race and go back to the previous set of regulations that worked for decades. Do let us know your views in the comment box. Thank you for watching.